But before we launch into the nuts and bolts of who you are and what you do and how you do it, I thought we could start with some foundational ideas about how you think. We live in interesting times. As we've talked together, this is a time when technology is poised to change every aspect of how we live and work, and hopefully this will also be in service of solving some of our world's most pressing problems instead of exacerbating them. And you've both been incredibly vocal and passionate about linking business with a broader purpose, which also means a workforce who looks and understands like the marketplaces you wish to enter and serve and transform. So let's just start with the bigger vision. What does tackling inequality mean to you, and how does all of this fit into a broader framework of a business imperative? And Dan, I'm going to tap you to start us off, please.
Okay.
And thank you for being
here. I was hoping Bill would go first. I could learn from him.
We work this all out.
You're the best.
But
love this guy,
you, my friend. So I think it starts a little bit with our obligation as businesses now. I don't think that businesses can shun or avoid the issues of our day. I think we have a moral responsibility to step up, to be a part of the solution, to work with governments, to work with NGOs, to work with academia, to figure out how can we come together to address these issues. And I think the very best businesses have a mission that inspires their workers, that have values that support them. And our mission at PayPal, simply put, is to try to democratize financial services, which is a fancy way of saying that we think that managing and moving money should be a right for all citizens, not just a privilege for the affluent. And that's a very inclusive vision. Mm-hmm. And as such, our primary value at PayPal is diversity and inclusion. There's a great saying that Justin Trudeau's dad actually came up with, which was that diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice. And I love that saying. I think it's really a beautiful saying. And for us, I think for all of us, that means that we need to step up as leaders and assure that we have inclusive workforces for two reasons. One, the more diverse your workforce, the more successful you will be as a company. There are facts over and over and over that prove that. Diversity of thought, diversity of opinion is incredibly important for a business. And two, if we're going to serve a global community, and for us it's all citizens, our workforce should mirror that population, that customer segment that we're trying to serve. And so we take this very, very seriously. We stand up for our values. We act on our values, because if values are just something you have up on a wall, they're not really values, they're propaganda. And right. If you act on them, then they really are values. And we can talk about some of that later on.
And we should. And as someone who writes about race every day, I talk a lot, and I interview and I speak to a lot of people about the business case for diversity, but the thing that's really distinctive about the way you approach this is that you're also approaching the moral case as well. Bill, do you want to jump in here?
Well, I just build on what Dan's saying. Purpose-driven companies outperform other companies that don't have these values and these high standards. In our case, we set a vision for the company to help the world run better and improve people's lives. And that was authentic to what we do with our software. The improve people's lives part was representative of the fact that we had to make the software more beautiful, easier to use. We actually improve people's lives by using it, but then also to do the right thing. And what we've learned is by having a purpose, by truly being a purpose-led company. In Canada, as an example, we were Glassdoor's employer of choice. Not because we said it, because the will of the people said it. 8 out of 10 people that we hire are millennial people. We have 1/3 of the workforce now that are women in Canada. We want to get that to half. We're striving for that. I look at things like autism at work and how that's changed the culture.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of people on the autism spectrum that can make an enormous contribution
Right.
in companies, and that has really built a stimulus in our culture where we're bringing people in that would normally, you know, not be at the forefront of a strategy. So it's all of these things and more that have made the company younger by 1 year every year. That didn't mean the retention rates fell with more tenured people. It just meant that we're hiring out of universities and creating our own vision for what we should be. We're not trying to copy anyone else's. And I think that authenticity has gone a long way.
So, and how does some of the data that you collect or the ways that you're using in developing technology change the lives of your customers for the better? Maybe we could dig into that a little bit before we start talking about your workforce, because they're very related, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan?
Can you repeat your question?
Sure. So let's go back to democratizing financial services for everybody. What are you learning from your customers that is, and what data do you collect from them that's allowing you to provide better services for them and then hook them into the grid in whatever way you're defining the grid? Because I think that's a big piece of the inequality component.
So there are 1.7 billion people that live outside of the financial system throughout the world. In the United States, that considers itself to be a more developed country, there are over 70 million adults that live outside the financial system. Over half of the population in the US has less than $400 of savings. So they're one emergency away from a downward spiral.
Right.
Car repair, health issue. And for those who are unbanked, they spend 10% of their disposable income on unnecessary fees and interest rates, which is the same, by the way, that they spend on food. And it's ridiculous. Yeah, it is a wow, whoever said that.
Insignium in the house.
It's ridiculous because technology and platforms and the fact that everybody has a smartphone right now, smartphones in India are selling for $25 right now, and you have all the power of a bank branch in the palm of your hand, and you can extend basic financial services for almost 80% less cost than it might do for a traditional bank branch. And I'll give you one example of data that we collect and how it improves the lives of our customers. We're probably now one of the top 5 lenders of working capital to small businesses in the US. Not many people know that about PayPal. And the reason that we are is that we use our own algorithms and data. We don't look at a FICO score at all when we decide to extend a loan. And as a result of that, we can extend loans with much more efficiency, much more lower than a traditional FICO score might enable you to do. And here are 2 stats that I'm particularly proud of. 25% of our loans go to the 3% of counties where 10 or more banks have closed branches.
Really?
So where do banks close branches? They close branches in neighborhoods where the median income is below the national average because they need, obviously, deposits to earn interest on to be able to successfully be profitable in those neighborhoods. So we, by definition, start lending to businesses that would not have a chance to get working capital. Traditionally, they're more skewed towards women-owned businesses, to minority-owned businesses because of the neighborhoods that we're lending to. And where we lend somebody working capital, their average sales go up by 22% versus a control group of 1% to 2%. So think about the impact that we're making for those business owners, for those neighborhoods, for those communities by using proprietary data and algorithms to actually be able to extend loans where the traditional institutions might not have been able to go do so. And so for us, this idea of using data and information, understanding the issues that our customers have, and then being able to extend that through through some sort of algorithm, some sort of machine learning intelligence that we can harness to be able to help the lives of those small businesses or consumers is incredibly impactful and right in line with the mission that we're trying to do.
That's awesome.
I'm going to open up to questions in a second because we're going to dig through some of the big best practices that you've learned on inclusion, particularly for the workforce.
Yeah.
But Bill, I wanted to ask you a similar question in terms of the personalized services, in terms of how you've been transforming the software that you're providing in a variety of sectors, from healthcare and beyond. What are you seeing about the lives of your customers and what are you measuring that actually has a broader impact in the community? Because that's something that seems to be very important to you.
Yeah, I think we're in the experience economy where if you think about any CEO running a company or companies, in the case of Dan with boards and everything, they care a lot about the culture. They care a lot about the products, the people in the company, the customers outside the company. So they want to create a movement inside the company that reflects the higher values and the purpose that they have so they can extend that outside the company. So when you think about the kinds of things that you are measuring and how you impact society, the first place you have to look is inside your own company, inside your own house. Because when you have happy employees, you're one step closer to having happy customers. When you have a thriving culture based upon innovation, the products that you make and you deliver to the marketplace will be outperforming those of the competition by definition.
Right.
And ultimately, you have to satisfy and delight these customers. And it's not just the right thing to do, it's great for business.
Right.
And it's well known that a 5% improvement in customer retention is equivalent to a 95% improvement in profit. So what we try to look at is this holistic idea of the experiences that we can create inside the company and how they impact things outside the company. And what's fascinating about this diversity and this inclusion, think about women in business as an example. Between now and 2025, you have a 29 trillion economic opportunity by giving women equal rights, equal opportunity, management opportunities across the globe. That's a huge market opportunity. So again, that's productivity, that's growth, that's all kinds of jobs that get created and momentum that gets created in a positive way in the global economy. You have to also look outside the borders of the mature markets. We're spending more and more time in the ASEAN region. You see what's happening in China. You see what's going on in the Middle East. There's just massive new market opportunities that are taking off. And if you can take the experiences in the big markets where you have a good footprint and a big presence to the new markets where you're serving new industries in new ways, again, on this experience platform, I think you can fundamentally change the world.
So how do you think about artificial intelligence? Because it's, race and inclusive cultures and leadership is my beat, but it is the single biggest technology question I get from everybody. And for people who are bullish and excited, it is going to solve all the problems. For people who are fear-based like I am, I'm worried about the data that we're using. I'm worried about just the building on a platform that already isn't working for people. You're smiling. You're
I was just thinking about Dan and the HANA database from SAP, but I wasn't. That's why I was smiling. Dan, it's your turn.
Oh, thank you. Look, I think there are a number of technology trends that are happening. You've got quantum computing happening, which is going to fundamentally change everything we think about computing. That's going to be fed by huge amounts of data. That our data exhaust as a population is growing exponentially right now. I could just give you one stat after another on that. And then you've got artificial intelligence, in which the more data and the more powerful the machines are, the more it starts to grow. And it will move from what's called specific AI right now, which is AI around a specific task, like language translation or beating a grandmaster in chess or beating a grandmaster in Go. And it will move to general AI in the next 10, 20 years or so. General AI is where a machine and a person, it's indistinguishable, really, for most people between that machine and a person. So that's going to happen, and I don't think there's any way getting around that. The question really is, how do we harness an ethics of technology around that? I think it's incredibly important for us as business leaders, as governments, to understand what this technology can do, both from a positive perspective and what it might do from a more worrisome perspective. And I think that is the great challenge of not just our generation, but the next generation growing up as well. How do we harness that power for technology? By the way, there are 10,000 things you can think of great things that could happen with it. Just one example is what I just showed, a very small one of like using algorithms to be able to extend credit further down to people who most need it. But I think we should not abdicate our responsibility to assure that technology is used the right way. And I think there's always been technologies that have occurred every single generation. When the phone was first introduced, people were like, oh my gosh, it's going to invade all of our privacy. You used to have somebody carry over a note to say that we were coming over to visit. Would you accept that? And now a phone call would come in. So there are changes and have been from one generation to the next. I do think the pace and speed of change is accelerating beyond anything we've seen before. But I do believe that we have the capability and the responsibility to assure that these are used in a wise manner, but we shouldn't think that that's going to be an easy thing. When machines start thinking, and they will, we need to figure out how to deploy that in the right manner.
I'm scanning for questions. Anybody want to? Scanning. So nobody's diversity numbers are where they want them to be. I mean, that's just sort of a general truth, but you're moving in the right direction. What are you doing to minimize bias in hiring, and what is working for you to help people stick around?
Yeah, well, a couple things. One is we have a technology that actually eliminates bias in the workforce with the software itself. See, computers don't have any bias. They're just computers. So if you think about...
But they reflect our bias if we're not careful.
That's the whole point. You want to build into the process the differentiation between what the human does to select the candidates and what the machine does. So Business Beyond Bias is an application that we have in our Success Factors platform that by definition takes the human bias out of the equation when sourcing and cultivating candidates. Now ultimately humans have to make decisions on the candidate, but computers can be very helpful in eliminating those natural biases that humans have. The other piece is you have to design the workforce in the image, and I think Dan said it absolutely right, in the markets in which we serve and we compete. And it's kind of wild to me that we're still having the conversation around women in leadership and gender equality in the workplace. It's just fascinating because there's so much talent. So we're just trying to get our hands on the talent. And we don't talk about women in leadership. We just talk about leaders. And if they happen to be women, that's great. And you have to really change the headsets. The other thing that we really have to have a heart for is, people that are different. And, for example, in our workforce, we kind of celebrate that because, again, it's celebrating this talent pool. And in high tech, you're in a war for talent. And you just have to have cultures that are very accepting of difference and actually celebrate difference. I'm very proud of the fact that, if you look at more than a third, in fact, 40% of the women leaders that we have in the company are doing just incredible things. And we've actually doubled the number of women in management in the company in the last 5 years. If you think about the people that we hire to a certain standard. Right now, it's kind of fascinating. Everything has happened so fast. Can you imagine the math on a 100,000 person workforce and getting that workforce younger by 1 year every year. And
Right.
just think about the math on that. And what we're trying to do is not just hire young people, but make sure those young people reflect the society, as Dan said earlier, that we compete in and we serve. And just by doing that alone, you take care of the mathematical thing, but more importantly, you change the culture.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because you're an old-time sales guy. I was joking with Dan that when I was younger, we're about the same age, I had stolen my friend's copy of the spin process because I was so shy. I needed I needed help to try to structure very basic conversations with people in the workplace, and I didn't work for Xerox, and I know that you did. But so much of culture is conversations that people have with each other, and they're getting younger, and the world is more divisive. What are you learning on the most granular level, particular first-time leaders? That's because everything drops off after that level. You're a wonderful individual contributor, you're a first-time leader, and then suddenly all the diversity numbers drop off from there. What are you learning about the human side of leadership at scale? And you have big organizations, and you've got millions of customers between you. They're all a conversation at a time.
Well, here I think is the most important thing is that.
I'll tell you.
Did you want to do that?
No.
Sure?
But he's
I can go back to that.
At me. No.
I go
Because
back to
I
that.
dropped the Xerox knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that I tell inside the company is that leadership matters.
Yep.
And I think this whole idea about inclusion is a choice, starts at the very top. I mean, you must say to your company, and there's all sorts of biases that just occur. They do, and you have to acknowledge them. And I think leadership has to step in and say, it's unacceptable. This is what we are going to become as a company.
Right.
And there's no negotiation around it, because we'll be stronger as a result. And there are techniques you can use, like, from assuring that every pool of candidates has a diverse candidate, every interviewing pool has diverse candidates interviewing as well. But from my perspective, it starts at the very top, at your board of directors. So like when I came into PayPal, 10% of our board was diverse, and 3 years later, 45% of our board is diverse. Okay, and so it has to start there. I feel like we just put out our diversity results. We self-report. 60% of PayPal is diverse now. 60%. And that's a pretty amazing number. 51% of our VPs and above are diverse. And so we look at this, we measure it, we look at each specific population, ethnic minorities, women. When I came into the company, one of the first questions I asked is, are